Every unsolved mystery begins with a question. The Hinterkaifeck murders begin with a family. In the spring of 1922, hidden among the forests and farmland of Bavaria, Germany, stood a small farmhouse known as Hinterkaifeck. It was more than a kilometer from its nearest neighbors, surrounded by open fields and dense woodland. After sunset, the farm disappeared into darkness, leaving only the sounds of the wind, the animals, and the forest. It looked like countless other farms scattered across rural Germany, but the people living there were anything but ordinary. The property belonged to 63-year-old Andreas Gruber and his wife, Kazilia. Living with them was their widowed daughter, Karl Gabriel, her 7-year-old daughter Kazilia, her 2-year-old son Joseph, and a newly hired maid named Maria Baumgartner. To strangers, they appeared to be an ordinary farming family. To their neighbors, they were surrounded by scandal. Years earlier, Victoria had married Karl Gabriel, a local man who was later drafted into the German army during the First World War. In December 1914, the military officially declared Karl dead in France. But there was one detail investigators could never ignore. His body was never conclusively identified. For years, rumors spread that Karl had survived the war and secretly returned home. No evidence ever proved those claims, but they would later become one of the most debated theories in the investigation. The rumors surrounding the family didn't end there. In 1915, Andreas Gruber and Karl Gabriel were convicted of incest by a German court. Andreas served time in prison, while Victoria received a shorter sentence. Although the case was closed legally, the scandal followed the family for the rest of their lives. When Victoria later gave birth to a son named Joseph, the gossip grew even darker. Many villagers believed Andreas himself was the child's father. Others believed the father was Lorenz Schlittenbauer, a local farmer who had entered a relationship with Victoria after Karl's reported death. Lorenz initially acknowledged Joseph as a son and even paid child support. Later, he withdrew that claim. Why he changed his mind remains uncertain. Whether Joseph's father was Andreas, Lorenz, or someone else entirely has never been established. Those rumors isolated the Gruber family long before the murders. Some neighbors avoided the farm. Others whispered about it. Even years later, people struggled to separate fact from gossip. But regardless of what anyone believed, there is no evidence that the family deserved what happened next. Then, only hours before the murders, another person arrived at Hinterkaifeck. Her name was Maria Baumgartner. She was 44 years old and had accepted a job as the family's new maid. The previous maid had abruptly quit, telling people she believed the farmhouse was haunted. Maria either dismissed those stories or simply needed the work. She unpacked her belongings, met the family, and prepared to spend her first night at Hinterkaifeck. She had no way of knowing it would also be her last. Looking back, investigators believe the murders may not have started on March 31st. They may have started days earlier. The first warning came in the snow. Andreas Gruber discovered a trail of footprints leading from a nearby forest toward the farmhouse. He followed them across the property but found no tracks leading away. Whoever had walked to Hinterkaifeck appeared never to have left. Shortly afterward, the family found a newspaper inside the house that no one recognized. Nobody subscribed to it, and no neighbor later claimed it. Alone, it meant little, but it wouldn't remain the only unexplained event. Then, a house key disappeared. The family searched the farmhouse, the barns, and the surrounding buildings. It was never found. Investigators later questioned whether it had simply been lost or quietly taken by someone who intended to return. The report soon became stranger. At night, Footsteps and other noises were heard coming from the attic. Andrea searched the entire property, including the attic itself, but found no intruder and no sign of forced entry. The incidents might have been dismissed as coincidence, if not for one final detail. The previous maid had refused to continue working at Hinterkaifeck, telling others she believed the farmhouse was haunted. She complained of hearing unexplained sounds and eventually left the job. On March 31st, Maria Baumgartner arrived to replace her. It was her first day at the farm. Whether she had heard those stories is unknown. If she had, she chose to stay anyway. Even today, historians disagree about these events. Some are supported by contemporary testimony, while others may have grown through decades of retelling. But investigators agreed on one point. Something had unsettled the Gruber family before the murders. Whether it was an unknown visitor, a stalker, or a series of unfortunate coincidences, no one could say. Then, as daylight faded on March 31st, 1922, the strange events ended and the killings began. March 31st, 1922, began like any other day at Hinterkaifeck. The family completed their usual chores. Animals were fed, work continued around the farm, and by evening the isolated property grew quiet once again. That same day, Maria Baumgartner officially began her first shift as the family's new maid. She had been at the farm for only a few hours. She would never leave it alive. As darkness settled over Hinterkaifeck, something happened that investigators have never been able to fully explain. One by one, members of the family left the house and walked toward the barn. No witness ever described what drew them there. It may have been a strange noise, an escaped animal, or someone they recognized calling from outside. Whatever the reason, they did not go together. Investigators believed Andreas Gruber entered the barn first. Moments later came his wife, Kazilia, then their daughter, Victoria. Finally, 7-year-old Kazilia. Each was attacked with mattock, a heavy farming tool capable of delivering fatal blows in a single strike. The positions of the bodies suggested the killer had remained hidden, waiting for each victim to arrive before striking again. With 4 members of the family dead inside the barn, the killer entered the farmhouse. Maria Baumgartner was murdered in her bedroom, likely before she even understood what was happening. Upstairs, 2-year-old Joseph was killed as he lay asleep in his cot. By the time morning arrived, every person living in Hinterkaifeck was dead. Yet the most disturbing part of the story may not have been the murders themselves. It was what happened afterward. Evidence suggested the killer did not flee. Over the following days, the cattle were fed, the horses were cared for, meals were prepared in the kitchen. Smoke continued rising from the chimney. To anyone passing by, the farm appeared occupied. No one imagined that 6 bodies lay inside. Why the killer stayed remains one of the greatest mysteries of the case. Were they hiding, waiting for an opportunity to escape? Or were they simply making sure no one discovered the crime too soon? No evidence has ever answered those questions. For nearly 4 days, Hinterkaifeck remained silent, until the silence itself became impossible to ignore. The morning after the murders, life around Hinterkaifeck seemed strangely normal. Smoke continued rising from the chimney. The livestock had been fed. Nothing suggested the family inside had been dead for days. But as time passed, people began to notice their absence. The Grubers failed to attend Sunday church. 7-year-old Kazilia never arrived at school. Neighbors saw no one work in the fields. At first, they assumed the family was simply keeping to themselves. By April 4th, that explanation no longer made sense. A small group, including neighbors Johann Sigel, Michael Pohl, and Lorenz Schlittenbauer, walked to the farm to check on the family. As they approached, everything appeared ordinary. The animals were alive. The buildings were undisturbed. There were no signs of a struggle. The search began in the barn. There, beneath a layer of hay, lay 4 bodies. Andreas Gruber, his wife, Kazilia, their daughter, Victoria, and 7-year-old Kazilia. The killer had made a brief attempt to cover them before leaving. The group immediately searched the farmhouse. In her bedroom, they found Maria Baumgartner. She had worked at Hinterkaifeck for less than a single day. Upstairs, 2-year-old Joseph was still lying in his cot. All 6 members of the household were dead. News spread rapidly across the surrounding villages. Within hours, police, doctors, journalists, and curious onlookers had arrived, long before modern crime scene procedures existed. Dozens of people walked through property. Investigators later believed valuable evidence was almost certainly lost. As the autopsies began, one discovery stood above all the others. Medical examiners concluded that 7-year-old Kazilia had not died immediately. She had survived for several hours after the attack. When her body was examined, investigators found clumps of her own hair tightly gripped in her hands. They believed she had pulled it out while lying beside the bodies of her family, injured, alone, and waiting for help that never came. More than a century later, it remains one of the most heartbreaking details preserved in the entire case. The investigation revealed other disturbing facts. The murders had not been committed for robbery. Money remained inside the farmhouse. Valuables were untouched. The motive had to be something else. Investigators also confirmed that the suspected murder weapon, a mattock, had been hidden on the property after the killings. Whoever committed the crime had taken the time to conceal it, yet made no effort to hide the murders themselves. Every new discovery answered one question and created another. By the end of the first day, investigators understood one thing with certainty. This was no ordinary homicide. It was a crime that seemed to defy logic, and with no eyewitnesses, no clear motive, and no obvious suspect, the search for the killer had only just begun. When investigators finished examining the crime scene, they had 6 victims, a murder weapon, and dozens of unanswered questions, but they had no eyewitnesses, no confession, and no evidence strong enough to identify the killer. The first person to fall under suspicion was Lorenz Schlittenbauer. He knew the Gruber family better than almost anyone. After Karl Gabriel's reported death, he began a relationship with Victoria and initially accepted young Joseph as a son, even paying child support. Later, he denied being the boy's father, ending the relationship. Some investigators believe resentment over Joseph's paternity or family disputes may have given him a motive. His behavior on the day the bodies were discovered also raised questions. Witnesses said Lorenz moved through the farmhouse with unusual confidence. He reportedly unlocked the door using a key instead of forcing it open and handled some of the bodies while others hesitated. To some, it looked suspicious. To others, it was simply the reaction of a man familiar with the property and desperate to find survivors. Despite years of investigation, police found nothing linking him directly to the murders. No witness placed him at the farm that night. No physical evidence connected him to the weapon. Suspicion alone was never enough. Another theory focused on Victoria's husband, Karl Gabriel. Officially, Karl had been declared dead during the First World War in 1914, but because his body was never conclusively identified, Rumors spread that he had survived and secretly returned home. Supporters of this theory believe Karl could have returned to find his wife involved with another man, his family surrounded by scandal, and questions over the paternity of Joseph. It sounded like a motive for revenge. The problem was simple. There was no evidence Karl survived the war, no confirmed sightings, no letters, no military records. Without proof that he was alive, the theory remained speculation. Investigators then considered a possibility that the killer had been watching the farm long before the murders. The footprints leading from a forest, the missing key, the unfamiliar newspaper, the footsteps in the attic, the previous maid who believed the farmhouse was haunted. Together, these incidents suggested someone may have been secretly living on or around the property before March 31st. Some historians believe this theory also explains why the killer appeared comfortable remaining at the farm after murders, feeding the animals and moving freely through the buildings. But once again, there was no evidence identifying that person. Other theories followed: traveling criminals, former soldiers, the Gump brothers, robbery, even secret societies. Each explained one piece of the mystery, but failed to explain them all. If robbery was a motive, why was money left untouched? If it was a stranger, how did they know the family's routine? If it was someone close to the family, how did they disappear without leaving a trace? Every answer created another question. As the years passed, the investigation slowly reached its limit. Witnesses grew older, memories faded. The original farmhouse was demolished in 1923, taking the crime scene with it. Decades later, modern forensic science solved countless cold cases around the world. But Hinterkaifeck was different. Most of the physical evidence had already been lost or contaminated long before those techniques existed. Even a modern review of the case by German police students in 2007 identified a likely suspect, but their conclusion was never released publicly out of concern for the suspect's surviving family and because no definitive proof existed. More than a century has passed since 6 people were murdered at Hinterkaifeck. The footprints still lead toward the farm, but never away. The missing key was never found. The newspaper was never claimed. No one has ever explained who stayed at the farmhouse after the murders or why. Perhaps somewhere, hidden in an old diary, a forgotten letter, or misplaced police file, the missing piece of this puzzle still exists. Or perhaps the truth disappeared with a generation that lived through those events. Some mysteries remain unsolved because investigators never found the evidence. The Hinterkaifeck murders remain unsolved because, despite generations of investigators searching for it, the evidence was never enough. And after more than 100 years, the identity of the killer remains one of history's greatest unanswered questions. Please like, share, and subscribe for more mystery videos.